Now let's talk about color management. Color management is not something that is necessarily specific to Resolve, but it's a workflow to make sure that the images that come out of your camera look as good as possible. If you've looked into color correction at all, you've probably seen an image that looks something like this, which is this kind of gray, desaturated, kind of milky looking footage. And what happens is when a camera shoots a scene, there are all kinds of different brightnesses that happen in the world. And the difference between the really bright parts and the really dark parts is called dynamic range. And any camera has a certain amount of dynamic range that it can see. So depending on where your exposure is set, it can actually see detail in the highlights and the kind of brighter parts or the shadows. And you sort of have to pick one most of the time. This is different than our eyes that have a much, much bigger dynamic range. That's why we can look out a window in our apartment and we can see details outside, and we can also see details inside. Well, a camera can't really do that. It kind of has to pick one in some way. When you have a lot of difference between the highlights and the shadows, what we really need to do is kind of squish those differences down so that the camera can record them. Essentially what we're doing is darkening the highlights and brightening the shadows so that we can record detail in a wide dynamic range. So this is really great because we have all of that data, but this is what the image looks like. That's okay because if we're going to color correct, well, we can adjust that. And we've already learned how to do things like adjust exposure, adjust saturation, and adjust contrast, which is really what this kind of image needs to look good. So we could do this by eye and take our lift down to darken the darker parts and take our gain up to brighten the brighter parts and push up our saturation. And we're gonna have a pretty good looking image. And so here is before and here's after. So we have the tools to be able to kind of adjust that. But the problem with that is because I just grabbed some of those adjustments and kind of willy-nilly kind of pushed them around, what I'm really doing is putting a lot of creativity into this image before I even really mean to. Is that a problem? Maybe or maybe not. But it doesn't really give us the very most clean starting point when it comes to adjusting our images. We're really starting with kind of a moving target, starting with something that we've already messed with, rather than looking at an image that looks similar to the way it did when the camera shot it. So if grabbing these controls and messing with them isn't the answer, well, then we have a problem. How do we make this log image that looks kind of gray and desaturated and ugly, how do we make that look nice again without putting all of our creativity into that and kind of messing with the image before we even really mean to? Well, the answer is color management. This image was shot on a RED camera, which records images a certain way. And a RED camera treats the highlights and the shadows and the color tones and everything a very certain way. In fact, it's a different way than the camera we're shooting on right now, which is a different way than a Blackmagic camera. Every single camera that shoots a log image shoots in its kind of own unique style of image. And what we can do is we can tell Resolve the exact camera that we shot with, and Resolve can apply kind of a reversal of that style to make the image look how it should and save us a ton of work. So here's what we're going to do in Resolve. All of these shots here are shot on a RED, and they all look kind of gray and desaturated and not super awesome. So what we can do is go to our project settings in the very lower right-hand corner and click on this little settings cog. That'll bring up our project settings window. And here under color management, right here under color space and transforms, we can switch this color science from DaVinci YRGB to DaVinci YRGB color managed. What we're really telling Resolve to do right now is to think about the types of shots that are in the timeline and to apply that kind of reversal to each of the shots that we tell it to. So We'll switch this to YRGB color managed, and our color processing mode is SDR, and that will work just fine for now. There are a bunch of settings that we can go over, but for the basics, this will work. Let's go ahead and hit save. And now nothing happens. Yay! I'm quitting. No, it's supposed to do that. It's okay. So let's go back to our shot of our lady here. And what happened? I thought this was supposed to fix all of our problems. Well, we've really only done half of the work. What we need to do now is tell Resolve what kind of camera we shot this with. So I can right click on any of these shots, and here where it says input color space, I can pick whatever color space I shot in, and that's just the fancy word for what kind of camera I shot it with and what kind of settings did I have. So I'm going to scroll down to red, and this was shot in red wide gamut RGB log 3G10. The reason I know that is because I looked it up. There's not really a way to know this just by looking at an image. You can kind of guess maybe, but the very best thing to do is either shoot it yourself and write down the settings, or make sure that you track down the settings for whoever shot it. And once I click that, boom, we have our corrected footage. I'm going to go back to the edit page real quick, and let's grab all of this footage that was shot on red, which is everything except for the girl crying in the rain shot. Hold down Command and unselect that. And I can right click on any of these and select input color space and scroll down to red wide gamut RGB log 3G10. And now all of our footage will be corrected to look good from that camera. This last shot right here, this was shot on a camera called an ARRI Amira. Again, I looked it up. I don't just magically know, although that would be cool to magically know. I'm going to right click on that one and go input color space, ARRI log C, and now we have a nice looking image there. I'll switch over to color, and now we have some really nice looking footage. So you might be asking at this point, why in the world would I ever shoot log if we're just going to reverse it? What is the point of that? Well, the point of it is because what we're doing is we are adjusting this log image so that we can get all of the information that we can before it puts this filter on the image again. So basically when you're looking at this awful gray looking image, it has a lot more information, and it's kind of a big playground where you can move the colors around without any problems or anything like that. You can adjust things in a really high quality, and then once you're all done adjusting them, it puts it through that filter that makes it look correct. So let's go ahead and put that back on. And now, since we're working in a color managed environment, any adjustment that we make in our color wheels and our curves and really anything down here in the palettes are going to be applied before that color transformation that turns it from log into something that looks nice on your monitor. So now right here, she's a little bit bright. So if I take this offset down and I just roll down a little bit, we can see I can move this pretty far, and this still looks really nice and looks really natural. If I didn't have color management on, like if I were just using this shot right here, and I were to take my offset down like this, we see that it's kind of darkening all of these shadows and it's looking a lot less good. That's because it's basically just doing this in a smarter way. If you're getting a little bit lost with color management, here's kind of a nice little recap. Anytime that we shoot something with a camera in a log format, it's really trying to squish all the information that it can into the signal that it can actually record. We take that kind of squished up signal, that kind of gray signal that has a lot of information in it, and we can make adjustments on it and then put it through a filter that makes it look correct, which both saves us a lot of time in doing corrections ourselves, and it also looks a little bit more technically accurate. So we're going to be working with color management. The rest of this training and everything that we do is going to be under that. And really, it's kind of behind the scenes. And so that's why we kind of wanted to go over it first. And now we can move on to some of the more detailed aspects of adjusting things here in the color palettes.